If you're new to 40k, one of the first things that hits you is just how many armies there are. And figuring out which one is right for you is overwhelming when you start out. Trust me, I bought 3 of the wrong armies before I found mine. So today I'm starting a 4-part series breaking down every faction in 40k. Who they are, how they play on the table, and whether you should collect them. No deep lore dives, no codex breakdowns, just a quick, honest guide to help you figure out where you belong in the 41st millennium. Starting out, we're going to go with the Imperium of Man, the largest faction in the game, the most varied, and honestly, the one most new players end up gravitating towards, so let's run through all of them. Starting out with the obvious one is the Space Marines, the poster boys of 40k. The army, Games Workshop, puts basically on every box, every advertisement, and every starter set. If you've heard of 40k, you've definitely heard of the Space Marines. And honestly, there's a reason they're everywhere. They're superhuman warriors in powered armor, genetically engineered killing machines who have been defending humanity for 10,000 years. Tactically flexible, visually iconic, and available in more variants than any other faction in the game. On the table, Space Marines are a balanced army. They're good at shooting, good at melee, with solid durability. They're not the best at any one thing, but they're competent at everything, which makes them genuinely forgiving for a new player. You won't get punished as hard for mistakes as you would in a more specialized army. The big decision with Space Marines is which chapter you want to collect. Whether it's Dark Angels, Space Wolves, Blood Angels, Ultramarines, each one plays a little differently and has its own visual identity. My personal pick is going to be Dark Angels. They're the medieval aesthetic with durable rules and one of the best Primarch models in the game. But that's a whole nother video. The Space Marines are best for newer players who want a balanced playstyle and people who want flexibility and variety. Next up, the Astra Militarum, or as most people call them, the Imperial Guard. These are regular humans, not Space Marines, not genetically enhanced, not blessed by the Emperor with supernatural strength, just regular people with las guns and tanks going up against the most terrifying threats in the galaxy. And somehow, they hold the line. There's something so compelling about that. The whole fantasy of the Imperial Guard is that they're just ordinary men and women doing extraordinary things out of sheer stubbornness and faith. Characters like Commissar Yarrick, who I talked about in my top 10 models video, embody exactly that. An old man with a claw for a hand who's earned the respect of the orcs just by refusing to die. On the table, the Guard are a horde army. They're bringing lots of bodies, lots of tanks, lots of artillery. You win through weight of numbers and firepower rather than elite individual units. They can be incredibly rewarding to play, but require a lot of models to paint, which is a real consideration for newer hobbyists. I'll be honest, I don't have a ton of experience playing against Guard, but every time I see a fully painted Guard army on the table is one of the most impressive sights in the hobby. The sheer scale of it is something else. When I have played against them, it has been mostly tank armies, so running Bane Blades and whatever else, and that's its own way to play as well. You don't have to do the full horde army of infantry. There is the tank side of things as well. This army is best for players who love tanks, horde playstyles, and that underdog fantasy. Now we're getting into territory that I love, the Adeptus Custodes. If Space Marines are humanity's finest warriors, Custodes are the finest of the finest. Each one is individually crafted by the Emperor himself. 10,000 golden warriors whose entire purpose is to guard the Golden Throne and serve as the ultimate expression of human potential. They are not Space Marines, they are something else entirely. On the table, Custodes are the most elite army in the Imperium. You're bringing very few models, but each one of them is extraordinarily tough. That 4-up invul save is the backbone of the whole army. It means your opponent needs to commit serious firepower just to remove a single model. When it works, Custodes feel nearly unstoppable. The trade-off is that when things go wrong, you feel every single loss. There's no throwing bodies at the problem. Every model that dies is a significant chunk of your army. That makes Custodes one of the most punishing armies to learn, which is exactly why I originally chose Necrons over them when I was starting out. But heading into 11th edition, with the new detachment and the melee changes, Custodes are in an amazing and exciting place right now. and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited to finally get them onto the table properly. Custodes are best for experienced players, elite army lovers, and people who want quality over quantity on the table and the shelf. It's also a great army to get started on for newer hobbyists as well. The Adeptus Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. And if you haven't looked at this army recently, the model range has had an absolute incredible glow up over the last few years. The Sisters are an all-female religious military order, fanatically devoted to the Emperor, and armed to the teeth with bolters, flamers, and heavy weapons. Their whole identity is faith as a literal weapon. And on the table, that translates into one of the most unique mechanics in the game, the Axe of Faith, or the Miracle Dice. As the game progresses and units are lost, the Sisters get more dangerous. They generate Miracle Dice through sacrifice and martyrdom, which they can use to guarantee critical rolls at key moments. That creates a really interesting gameplay experience when you're almost rewarded for units dying, which is not something many armies can say. It also means your Sisters get stronger as the game goes on, which suits a patient, tactical playstyle. I haven't faced Sisters on the table too much, so I can't give you a deep personal take on playing against them, but the model range is stunning, and the faith mechanic makes them one of the most mathematically cohesive armies in the game. If the religious warrior aesthetic appeals to you, Sisters are absolutely worth looking into. The Sisters are best for players who want unique mechanics, resilient armies that improve mid-game, and stunning model aesthetics. Fair warning, they are probably one of the hardest armies, in my opinion, to paint. So if you're newer to the hobby, be aware that you may have to have some patience and maybe look up some guides on how to properly paint them until you get your feet under you. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the tech priests of Mars, and this one is unlike anything else in the Imperium aesthetically. The Admech are the Imperior's keepers of technology, a religious cult that worships the machine god and maintains every ship, tank, and weapon in humanity's arsenal. Their armies are a mix of cyborg Skitarii warriors, robotic battle automata, and high-tech war machines. Half flesh, half metal, and wholly devoted to the Omnissiah. On the table, Admech are described as one of the most technically demanding armies in the game. They're incredibly versatile, but you need to stack buffs correctly and deploy the right units into the right matchups to get the most out of them. That Swiss Army knife flexibility is a double-edged sword. In the right hands, Admech can be devastating, but the learning curve is steep. This isn't an army I've played against extensively, so I'm speaking more from research than personal experience here. What I can tell you is that the model range is visually spectacular. If you want an army that looks like nothing else on the table, and you enjoy a technical buff stacking playstyle, Admech is worth your time. But they're also one of the most expensive armies to get into. They don't have a lot of cost-saving value boxes, so be aware of that. They're best for experienced players who enjoy the complex buff stacking and highly technical playstyle. Imperial Knights. And this one has a very simple pitch. What if your entire army was giant walking war machines the size of buildings? That's it. That's Knights. These are massive armored mech piloted by noble households, striding across the battlefield and obliterating everything in their path. Where Custodes are elite infantry, Knights take that concept to an absolute extreme. You might only have to take 3 or 4 actual models for your entire army, but each one is an absolute centerpiece that takes up some serious real estate on the table and demands attention from your opponent from turn 1. On the table, Knights are an imposing, high-impact army that can feel incredible when your big machines are stomping across the board. The trade-off is similar to Custodes. Every loss hurts. There's no safety net of bodies, and if your opponent finds a way to take your Knights apart efficiently, you can run out of an army very quickly. They're one of the most rewarding armies to paint in the entire hobby. A fully painted and weathered Knight with a custom heraldry and battle damage is one of the most amazing and impressive things you can put on the table. If you want a small model army with maximum visual impact, Knights are hard to beat. The Knights are best for players who want a low model count, maximum visual impact, and high stakes playstyle. And finally, the Imperial Agents, the catch-all faction for the shadowy organizations that operate across the Imperium. The Inquisition, Assassins, and any other special operatives that don't belong to any single army. What makes Imperial agents unique is flexibility. You can field them as a standalone army or attach elements of them to other Imperial forces, which opens up some interesting list building combinations. You want to add an assassin to your Space Marine army? Imperial agents make that happen. Full transparency. This is the faction I know the least about on this list or any other. It's a more specialist choice and less of a traditional standalone army than anything else we've covered. If you're drawn into the Inquisition aesthetic or want that flexibility to mix elements into an existing Imperial army, it's worth researching further. But as a starting army for a new player, I'd probably point you somewhere else first, like anywhere else. They're best for experienced players who want some flexibility, supplement options, or just a deep Inquisition theme. Bear in mind, they don't have a ton of support from GW, so I would only collect bits and pieces of them as your other armies would need them. So that's every Imperium faction in Warhammer 40k. Space Marines, Astra Militarum, Adeptus Custodes, Adeptus Sororitas, Adeptus Mechanicus, Imperial Knights, and the Imperial Agents. Something for every kind of player, from horde armies to elite few model forces to giant walking war machines. If any of these caught your eye and want to know more, drop it in the comments and I'll go deeper in a future video. And if you already play an Imperium army, let me know which one you chose and why you chose it. I'd love to hear it. Part 2 is coming soon. We're going to be covering the Chaos factions: Death Guard, World Eaters, Thousand Sons, Emperor's Children, and more. And yes, one of those is my next army, so you already know I'm going to be a little bit biased. Part 3 will be the Xenos, the Necrons, Tyranids, Orcs, Eldar, and everything in between. That one I'm very excited about. Subscribe so you don't miss them either. We'll see you in the next one.